Mornings in Brookdale always wore a thin sheet of gold, sliding through old glass and spilling across worn benches and scuffed floors. That light was weakest in Courtroom 4. Ceiling fans creaked. The gavel of justice hadn't arrived yet. Arthur Cole stood in the aisle, hands trembling around a white notice stamped in red, "Citation hearing, illegal parking." He was 72, his gray sweater threadbare. He glanced up, looking for the clerk. From the door, a strip of blue uniform cut through the room like a cold ink stroke. "Officer Mason Clark." "Sit down." The man's voice hissed between his teeth. Arthur tried a courteous smile. "Officer, I just need to ask about my public defender." The sound cracked dry, like wood against flesh. A slap. Small, even. But that thin golden light recoiled. Blood bubbled at the corner of Arthur's mouth. He stumbled back against the bench. Others froze, a few eyes dropped, as if searching for a fallen handout on the floor. Up on the bench, the judge's coat rack stood empty. She was known to arrive late for a heavy calendar. "When I say sit, you sit," Mason Clark said again, not even looking at the man he'd hit. "Understand?" In row 3, Ethan Cole rose. He was still as a statue, except for a twitch at the bridge of his nose, a shadow hardening in his eyes. He sat again at once, not out of fear, but out of the trained choice of someone used to facing danger. Watch, remember, collect every fact. He let his gaze sweep the room, the brunette clerk glued to her screen, 3 officers against the wall, hands in pockets, a brown-skinned man clutching a cap, staring at the floor, an old woman in a pale blue beanie, lips clamped tight. Ethan logged it all: time, position, sequence, body language. He could hear the clock hand tick. Arthur Cole sat, shoulders folded in. He pressed a tissue to his lip. His other hand tugged at his sweater hem. Ethan clenched his fist, then let it go. He'd seen worse than this in the thick files labeled civil rights violations. But never with his own father as the one being struck. When the gavel finally cracked and Judge Lydia Crane stepped in, the room was already arranged, the elderly silent, the badge straight, and justice, if it existed, loitering somewhere out on the sidewalk, waiting to be called. Ethan eased his father out of the courthouse. The day was brighter outside, but the man's eyes held only the sting. "What are you doing here?" Arthur asked, trying for normal. "Passing by," Ethan said. "And I saw." "It was just a slap, Ethan. Let it go. I just want to pay and go home." "You think that was the first time?" Ethan looked straight into those clouded eyes. "Has he stopped you before?" Arthur hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Called me an old man who doesn't know his place. Said people like me should remember where we stand. I didn't want to trouble you." "Trouble me?" Ethan exhaled. "I'm a civil rights agent. This is my work." Arthur started to reply, then didn't. His son had chosen a path unlike most: patience and proof. Arthur knew Ethan wouldn't shout in a courtroom or punch a uniform. He would do the one thing silence fears most: turn on the light. Ethan's office at the federal building was nothing fancy. 1 desk, 2 chairs, a whiteboard crowded with arrows. He set down coffee and opened Brookdale's internal records. The name Mason Clark appeared 20 times in 15 years. Complaints of assault, abuse of authority, slurs, all closed for lack of evidence. What caught Ethan wasn't the number. It was the pattern: every complaint first handled by Captain Robert Hale at patrol, days later, routed to an independent committee with ties to the local court, and if anything smelled criminal, the file landed on Judge Lydia Crane's desk. Everything stopped there. Everything always stopped there. Ethan hauled a box of records onto the table. He read until his eyes burned. He sketched on the board: date of complaint, outgoing call, clerk's name, result. He drew a line from Hale to Crane. Another from Clark to Hale. The lines crisscrossed like cracks under paint. The next morning he brought a report to his supervisor, Special Agent in Charge Harold Nguyen. Harold leafed through slowly, dark eyes narrowed with focus. "What do you actually have?" Harold asked. No tape yet. No internal witness willing to speak. But the pattern repeats too neatly. And my father is the newest victim. Your family in the mix means we'll get scrutiny. Harold leaned back. But I trust you. Find the person who tried to speak before. In places like this, there's always someone who tried. A name flared from a corner of an old file: Maria Lopez, former internal affairs investigator, relocated to Carlsbad in 2018 for personal reasons. Ethan dialed the last working number, a woman's voice, low and rough, like through a door. I can't talk about this over the phone, Maria said. Come by Saturday afternoon. Not earlier, not later. The concrete stairs were steep and damp. A cactus pot sat outside 3B. Sunlight slipped through bars, laying diamonds on the floor. Maria Lopez opened the door. 40s, dark eyes, hair tied high. Somewhere in the apartment a radio whispered old Mexican standards. Plastic boxes lined a shelf with tidy labels: 2016, complaint flood; 2017, internal; 2018, anomalies. You're Ethan Cole, she said, no question. Yes. Your civil rights. Her gaze weighed as honesty. And you're personally involved. My father was slapped in court by Mason Clark, Ethan said plainly. But even if he weren't, this pattern couldn't be ignored. Maria sighed. I spent a year trying to pull light in there, but the door slammed shut. Robert Hale had me followed. Judge Crane threatened to sue me for defaming the judiciary. I moved. I needed my pension. Do you still have anything? Maria glanced at the door, then the kitchen, where a kettle hummed. She turned off the flame, pulled down the box labeled 2018, anomalies. Inside lay an old voice recorder. I hid this, she said softly. Clark and Hale talked in the locker room after a night shift. They didn't know I'd planted a test mic. I thought it would be proof. When I brought it in, Hale said, you should think about your future. I didn't dare go public. She pressed play. Static rattled, then a gravelly man. I cracked 2 of his ribs. He needed to learn to shut up. A short laugh. Another voice, I'll talk to Crane. Like always. Ethan looked at Maria. Shame flickered in her eyes, a shame that wasn't hers. I was afraid, she said. But fear's not a crime. I stayed clear-headed enough to keep this. Thank you, Ethan said, slow and real. Will you testify? Only with federal protection. And, when I believe the door's really open this time, we'll open it. Harold listened to the tape, thoughtful. Enough to get a wire, he said. But we tread carefully. Crane's a judge. She knows how to hide inside words. A week later, a federal judge signed off. Ethan sat in the monitoring room, headphones on, eyes moving with the waves crawling across the screen like an EKG. The equipment hummed, cars outside, a door thunking, water running. Then voices. Sam, be careful with the old man in court. Robert Hale. I was teaching him to keep still. Mason Clark. The feds are sniffing. Crane will handle it. Like always, huh? Ethan marked the clip. Harold nodded. Keep going. For days later, the line reached Judge Lydia Crane's office, not directly, but through a front number at her chief clerk's desk. Her voice was smooth, like scheduling a tea time. Robert, I don't want to hear the word problem. I want to hear taken care of. There's an old recording. Hale dropped his voice. No one believes old tapes. In this era, anyone can splice. Do what we always do, quietly. Don't let this get noisy. Ethan leaned back. The words were velvet, cold and clean. A cruelty with white gloves. Late that night he went home. His place had an old guitar and a couple of cacti. A text from Arthur blinked. You don't have to work yourself to the bone for me. I'm okay. Ethan stared at it. He thought of the people who said I'm okay because they'd learned that saying they hurt made others walk away faster. Before any confrontation, Ethan needed a full picture. He and the team stitched data: 20 complaints, 20 calls from patrol's switchboard to a secure line in the judge's office, 20 insufficient evidence memos, 20 files with missing pages, 20 internal notes with the same phrasing. Harold circled and read. "We need something current," Harold said. "A situation to catch them in the act. Not just the past." Ethan knew who would create that situation, the ones who never stopped. He called Maria. "I need you to reach a former victim you still trust," he said. "Someone strong enough to file again. This time we track every step." Maria was quiet a beat. "There's one, Rosa Vasquez. Her husband's jaw was broken by Clark in 2018 while walking their daughter to school. They kept quiet out of fear. But we still talk. They met at a coffee shop by the church." Rosa cupped the mug in both hands, her eyes deep enough to hold a winter. Beside her, 8-year-old Emily colored a green crayon dog. "We don't want trouble," Rosa said, almost apologizing. "We're here to take the trouble," Ethan said. "I can't promise anything except we won't let go halfway." Maria set the old recorder on the table. "You asked me once what would make it different. This is part of it." Rosa looked at the device, then at her daughter swapping crayons. She nodded. "I'll file." Again. The day Rosa filed at the station, federal cameras watched the lot, the lobby, and the back stair. Directional mics covered the intake desk. Everything was lawful, everything under warrant. "Who'd you think you're suing?" the desk sergeant asked flatly. "Officer Samuel Clark." Rosa swallowed. "For what happened in 2018, and for threatening me last week at the supermarket." "You got proof?" Rosa showed a text, anonymous, with a photo of her license plate and the lines, "Stay quiet if you know what's good." The mic caught it clean. The camera got her profile. Behind the counter a little light blinked, like a lazy eyelid. 3 hours later, the clerk's line in the judge's office rang. "Lydia, new complaint on Clark," Hale said. "We handling this?" "Like always," she answered, stirring tea. "Let the file drift." "Drift where?" Ethan wondered. Into the whirlpool someone had drawn beneath a drawer. The meeting with Judge Lydia Crane was legal and polite. Ethan and Harold brought a subpoena. Her chambers had 2 tall bookcases and a window on the park. Morning light draped her shoulders like silk. "You're trampling on judicial ground," Lydia said evenly. "All complaints are handled by the law." "We know," Harold said, laying sheets of arrows on her desk. "What we don't understand is why every complaint passes through one pair of hands and then dies quietly." She smiled like it was an old story. "You don't understand that most complaints are emotional. Citizens don't like being told what to do. Police are the front line of order. And the rear guard is where the truth gets buried." Ethan asked lightly. "Words," she said. "Mind yours, Agent. We're in a court." Ethan glanced around, a seascape, an expensive fountain pen, a giraffe-shaped paper clip. Innocent things, good at looking pretty. The loveliest covers sometimes hold the meanest games. "Rosa Vasquez's file," Harold said, flipping. "Have you seen it yet?" "No," Lydia replied, a hair too fast, a shade too neat. Harold slid over the call record from Hale to her clerk's number, time-stamped 47 minutes earlier. Odd. A tiny tremor crossed her eyes. The smile remained, but something inside her face lost its footing. "This meeting is over," she said. "You have no authority." "We have a federal wire," Harold said calmly. "And you just lied." A small wrinkle deepened at Lydia's lip. She said nothing more. When the agents left, the sunlight no longer fell evenly across her shoulders. A gray weekday morning. Fog clung to Robert Hale's lawn. Ethan wore headphones in the cramped monitoring room, lights blinking red and blue. "Robert, shut it down," Mason Clark said on the line. "Bad feeling. Eyes on us. You scared of the word feds?" Hale snorted. "Relax. She says she'll teach them manners." Every time she says like always my neck stiffens, Mason muttered. That old guy, whose father is he? Ethan straightened. His face didn't change. But somewhere in his gut, a small drum started thumping. Heard he's an agent's dad. Cole, maybe. Hale said. Cole. Mason went silent a few beats. Damn. No more calls. Meet at the courthouse office at 2. She wants to discuss. Old tapes need to disappear. Harold leaned in. That's the meet, he said quietly. Let's go. Brookdale Courthouse had a rear hallway few used. At 2:05 p.m., a federal pinhole camera saw Hale come up the stairs, Mason close behind, eyes darting. The judge's clerk led them to a closed conference room, really a record storage space with iron racks and the smell of damp paper. Lydia stood waiting, hands folded. You're late. Traffic, Mason grunted. Nothing's jammed here but judgment, Lydia said. The 2018 recording. Where is it? That, Hale glanced at Mason. Maria Lopez has it. She's in Carlsbad, Lydia said, bored. I know. The issue is here. There's a federal wire. They're listening. So, plan? Mason asked, eyes narrowing. Like always, Lydia lifted a large envelope. This is a memo to ask the federal court to review a conflict of interest, the agent's relative as a victim. We stall, push the file into a maze. In that maze, the tape gets lost. And if it doesn't? Hale asked. Then we make it unbelievable, Lydia said, voice even. A bit of mud clouds any stream. You think you can use mud forever? Ethan said, stepping in with Harold and 2 more agents. The door swung open quietly, as if it had always wanted to. The 3 turned. A storm charged Mason's eyes. What are you doing here? Lydia asked, calm. This area is restricted. By a federal search warrant, Harold raised it. And with arrest warrants for Mason Clark and Robert Hale, for obstruction and conspiracy to violate civil rights. Mason stepped back. Hale scanned for a back door. Lydia held her chin up. You're making a grave mistake, she said. You'll answer for this. We're happy to, Ethan replied, eyes on Mason. As for you, Officer Clark, want to explain the slap in open court? Or that day you said you broke 2 ribs on a dad walking his kid to school? Mason pressed his lips tight. Cords stood out in his neck like ropes. When the cuffs touched his wrists, the light through the storage room window turned sharp as a blade. News fell on Brookdale like a late-season rain. Officer arrested on civil rights charges. Captain tied to cover UPS. Judge implicated in obstructing justice. On TV, pundits spoke of a few bad apples or a crack to fix. But those who had kept quiet knew, not a crack, grain in the stone, soaked for years. Arthur Cole sat before the screen, hands laced like in prayer, though he kept no faith but decency. He watched his son on the news, Ethan walking through microphones, voice steady and low. This isn't personal. It's about 20 people who were silenced. At HQ, Ethan wrote the report the way you write a storm diary. Minutes logged, calls listed, evidence mapped. He thanked Maria Lopez in the official record and named Rosa Vasquez as the person who set the wheel in motion. Names. Names that deserved to be written, not because they were symbols, but because they were people. Mason Clark sat across from Ethan. No gun, no badge, just a wrinkled shirt. Red threads veined his eyes like a caged animal's. Why'd you join the force? Ethan asked. Because I know how to keep order, Mason said. Where I grew up, if you couldn't hit, you got hit. You kept order by slapping an old man for asking about a lawyer? Silence. This time it had no authority. He wouldn't listen, Mason said at last. I said sit. He talked. I reacted. You don't get it. I get that reaction is trained, Ethan said, leaning back. You were trained to see other people's rights as a nuisance. Who trained you that way? Robert Hale? Or someone higher? Mason looked down, then at the corner camera. "I'll talk," he exhaled. "But I want a deal." Ethan promised nothing. He slid a blank page and a pen across. "Write what you know. Names. Dates. Amounts. Calls. We'll forward it to the U.S. Attorney." Mason took the pen like a nail for his own coffin. Lydia Crane entered with her lawyer. She didn't look at the camera. She didn't look at Ethan. She sat straight as at a medal ceremony. "I won't answer questions," she said. "Everything will be addressed in court with counsel." "Of course," Ethan nodded. "But please listen to this." He played the clip. "Don't let it get noisy. Do what we always do." Lydia's voice filled the white room. For a second, the wrinkle at her lip cut deep. "Spliced," she said briskly. "We have digital authentication from the manufacturer and court-ordered cable taps," Ethan replied. "Plus Mason Clark's statement." "You trust a man like that?" "I trust patterns," Ethan said. "I trust the people who were hit. I trust 20 calls landing at the judge's office 15 minutes after each complaint, 20 times." He paused. "And I trust you forgot that mud can't cloud a river forever, especially when the rain finally comes." She gave a thin laugh. "You should write poetry, Agent." "I don't know how," Ethan stood, packing the device. "I only write reports." On the day of trial, Brookdale glowed. People filled the halls. Some eyes that had dropped before now lifted. The prosecutor told it clean: 20 complaints, the 2018 recording, fresh wire taps, the timing pattern, Maria's testimony, Rosa's, and Mason's shaking, handwritten account. "We called her every time," she said. "Let the file drift." Lydia's defense fired back: "Misunderstood procedure." They spoke of selective framing, of the presumption of innocence. They invoked careful justice. Ethan sat front row, eyes forward. Beside him, Arthur rested his hand over Ethan's. He said nothing. Whispered voices rose and fell like surf. Rosa Vasquez took the stand. She kept it plain, no embellishment, no blazing fury. Her voice was a long, little-used road. When she finished, she looked to the gallery where Emily clutched a tiny pendant. The girl smiled, a smile not yet taught to hold back. Maria Lopez followed. She glanced around the courtroom as if it were a different room now. "I was afraid," she said. "But silence made me more afraid of myself." When Ethan testified, he spoke like a carpenter setting boards flush in a frame: no flourishes, no fireworks. He described the courtroom slap the way he would a line on a chart: clear, painful, true. The jury came back. Guilty on Mason Clark, civil rights violations and assault under color of law. Guilty on Robert Hale, conspiracy to obstruct justice. Guilty on Lydia Crane, obstruction and abuse of judicial power. No one clapped. But people exhaled. Something heavy shifted, quietly, without show, like a door that had been stuck finally moving on its hinges. Sentencing landed: Mason, 26 years, Hale, 10, Lydia, 12. Brookdale PD went under federal oversight. A hotline lit up. Calls poured in late at night, men and women speaking soft, as if afraid to wake someone sleeping inside the walls. They told of roadside stops with no reason, of batons tapping hoods, of thin smiles. They wanted to hear that this time would be different. Back at his board, Ethan wiped the arrows from the peeling paint and drew clean squares. In blue he wrote: Rosa, protected, Maria, consulting independently, hotline, 67 calls/2 weeks. The door eased open. Arthur stepped in with an envelope. Mailman, he smiled. Ethan wiped his hands, opened it. Inside was lined notebook paper and round school handwriting. Dear Mr. Ethan, thank you for teaching the people in uniform to do the right thing. I want to be like you when I grow up. Emily. Below was a crayon drawing in green, a man standing between two buildings, holding a flashlight high. The beam was yellow. Ethan studied it for a long beat and laughed softly. She draws well. Beautiful, Arthur nodded. Good enough to hang. Ethan pinned the letter to the board at the very top. Beside it, he wrote, "Justice begins when someone dares to speak." In the months after, Brookdale changed slowly. People whistled softly on the sidewalk, less worried about looking over their shoulders to ask directions. Courtroom 4 got a new door, the glass no longer yellowed. The fan still creaked, but the breeze felt gentler. Maria Lopez returned in a different role, independent advisor to the Oversight Committee. She went to community meetings, explaining process, how to defend yourself legally. Each time she spoke, her posture straightened another inch, her voice grew clearer, like her spine was reforged with a metal called self-belief. Rosa worked at a bakery on the south side. It was always busy. She smiled more. Emily drew more pictures, a red bicycle, a brown dog, a sketch of two figures, an old man in a knit cap, a younger one with a flashlight. Across the top, two heroes. Sometimes Ethan walked past Courtroom 4 just to watch the sunlight lick the threshold. He remembered the first time he'd seen it, thin as a breath. Now it felt denser, less reluctant. He didn't believe light simply showed up. People had to open the door. One night Harold pulled Ethan into a wood-paneled bar. "You did good," he said once. "They Saturday not many keep their heads when family's in the funnel." "I thought about doing right," Ethan raised his glass. "And keeping things peaceful for my dad." Harold smiled, tired as someone who'd read a few hundred case files. Justice isn't the storm. It's the roof folks build before it hits. People think wind rises because someone shouts loud. No, the wind's the wind. This time there was a roof, so it didn't carry them off. "I'm not sure I caught the metaphor," Ethan chuckled. "You did," Harold sipped. "Tomorrow we start reviewing old files. There may be more names buried." "I know," Ethan nodded. "And I'm ready to dig." Late one afternoon Arthur asked Ethan over. He opened an old wooden box and pulled out photos. A young man, Arthur as a teacher, at a blackboard with chalk, another of a brown-haired kid on a stoop with a toy car, Ethan, the last of Ethan's mother, gone many years, tilting her head with a smile. "Your mother always said, 'Don't stay quiet when you see wrong,'" Arthur said, voice wrapped in cloth. "I stayed quiet too long." That slap, it hit my silence too. Ethan set a hand on his father's shoulder. "You spoke. And no one has the right to hit you for that." Arthur nodded. His clouded eyes were wet. He didn't wipe them. "You'll be busy," he said. "I want you to know, you don't carry it alone." "I've got you," Ethan said softly. "And people who spoke up. That makes it lighter." They sat a while in a quiet that wasn't the heavy hush of Courtroom 4. This was the home kind of quiet, where pictures say what's hard to say. At HQ, Ethan built a new wall. Not to link bad actors, but to link the good: Rosa, Maria, Emily, Arthur, Harold, a group of volunteer law students, a local reporter who'd kept at it from day one. Across the top he wrote, "Map of the Unsilent." Each name was a rivet holding a boat against waves. Each story, a patch on a sail. Another morning, another envelope. Ethan tore it open. "Mr. Ethan, I got an A in art today. My teacher said my picture has good light." I said, "Light is good when someone holds the flashlight in the right place." Emily. Below, a drawing of the courthouse with its doors thrown wide and light pouring down the steps. Ethan smiled and pinned it beside the first. The old flashlight beam now had bright flares leaping past the frame. Sometimes you don't need a storm to change the weather, he thought. Sometimes you just open the window. Courtroom 4 opened again. The fan still whined. But the clerk now looked up when asked a question and answered with a nod and a small smile. A young officer walked the rows adjusting a sign, "Public Defender, Window 2." Arthur sat in the back. He'd come not because he needed anything but to see the place that first struck him and no longer scared him. Ethan sat beside him, quiet. The door swung. The gold spilled in full. "What do you think?" Ethan asked.
I think, Arthur glanced around, dropping his voice, like sharing a secret.
I think the light found its way. Not by itself, Ethan smiled. People cut a path. They stepped out. On the courthouse steps, a breeze. Laughter from a cluster of law student volunteers helping an older couple with legal aid forms. Farther on, a poster, "Your Rights in Police Encounters, read aloud, don't stay silent." Ethan looked up at the sky. No fireworks. No drum roll. But he knew in places like Brookdale, victories didn't boom, they were the simple ability to cross a room without fearing a slap. That night, Ethan sat under a small desk lamp and wrote. Justice isn't the absence of darkness. It's the habit of flipping on the light whenever you enter. People like Maria, like Rosa, like Emily, they're the switch. My father reminds me the light is always there, if you reach. He closed the notebook and killed the lamp. In the dark, he could still see that thin Brookdale morning, gold sliding through the blinds, soft as a promise.